Hi, welcome to the SoDA series live from South by Southwest in lovely Austin, Texas. I'm a South by newbie, so go easy on me here. But I'm Hannah Alsaker, the Global Head of New Business for Adobe and also the founder of Firefly for Enterprise. And it's really awesome to be with all of you at the epicenter of creativity and technology. And I'm joined by some awesome leaders here to have a conversation. I understand that SoDA does this monthly to have candid, really in-depth conversations. So we'll be digging into the good and the bad and maybe the ugly of AI as we go through that. So I think you guys are going to introduce yourselves, but here I'm joined by Eric Karasik, Dustin Califf, and Jameson Proctor. And before we begin the conversation part, I'd love for each of you maybe to give a little origin story, what you're focused on, and maybe one fun thing that you've done at South by.
Sure, I can get started. So I'm Eric Karasik. I'm a co-founder of a company called Hush, designing physical spaces and helping brands express their stories and interactivity in spaces. And I'm very focused on technology, so I've always been kind of a 3D animator, designer, architecturally minded person. And so I do a lot of research, innovation, and development of new techniques and systems that we use at the company.
Awesome. My name's Dustin. Hopefully our live audience can hear us. I'm going to try to talk up, but I'm a president at Tool, which is a creative production partner that specifically works in the brand and advertising space. And we happen to be at like the intersection of content and technology. So generative AI and everything that's happening with Firefly and Adobe is right up our alley. Like we've been waiting for this moment, for years. So at our company, we're based in Los Angeles. We work with live action directors who have won Academy Awards and things like that. And we shoot commercials and Super Bowl spots, but we also work with AI to try to find new ways to scale, personalize, and kind of use it in our workflow. And I've actually been fortunate enough to work with AI and brands since 2016. So I have a lot of fun stories to share about how things have changed from back then, which was more like the predictive AI days, to now in generative AI. So anyway, it'll be fun to talk with everybody.
Amazing. And I'm Jameson Proctor. I'm partner and CEO of Athletics, a brand innovation studio in Brooklyn, New York. We like to say that we help our clients design their place in the world by building brands that get to work. And if we look at what we've done over the past 20 years, we've always sort of existed in this now kind of table stakes intersection of strategy, design, and technology. But when we think about the ability of creative technology, creative automation, and generative AI to augment brand strategy and brand identity work, it's a really exciting time to be working in the space.
Great, so your intros are a great lead into the first question because you're all early adopters. You've been in, as we said, AI is not a new thing. It's been around for quite some time. It's just gone through evolutions from predictive. Now we're in the generative space. Then it's agentic, and who knows what's coming next. We're sitting in March 2025. The first commercial or public generative models probably came out in late 22. Take me through the journey of where you think AI has come, generative, and what's the state of generative AI today, especially in how you're using it in your work with clients. And we'll just go down the line.
Sure.
For the first one, yeah.
So, we've been exposed to it for a long time. I feel like the exponential curve of growth that is happening now, we're really riding the hockey stick up rapidly, which is kind of like humans have a bad ability to understand large numbers and large scales and exponential mathematics, and I think we're getting to that point where there's so much new stuff happening at all times that it's hard to keep up, but it's getting really exciting, and I'm personally very excited about the video generation tools that are coming out even the past month. It's a really incredible, and I think for us, combining that with some of these agentic workflows of combining multiple different tools and agents and combining those, that's been really a big unlock for us and some of the projects that we're working on.
Great. Dustin?
I mean, yeah, since the summer of 2022, I remember one of our creative technologists getting early access to DALL-E and ChatGPT and all these things, and we were using it for like actually a video we created for a conference that played like during the keynote. So we've been experimenting and having fun, but I would say that I've had a chance to go around the country and talk to lots of different brands and agencies about AI since 22, and it was still a lot of like people wanting us to come in and inspire, you know, and unlock. But I would always hear afterwards, like you could tell nobody was really ready to like actually use it for a real commercial project. Everyone for the past year and a half has been using it for visualization and treatments and things like that and decks. But nobody was really ready to use it from a real standpoint. And I kept hearing from everyone, oh, but my CFO or my CEO wants us to use AI. But somebody actually said this to me at a conference. They were like, unless, right now AI for marketing is sort of it's sort of like a vitamin, you know? And until there's the disease and somebody needs the cure, then people are gonna start using it. When the CFO says you absolutely have to, or your creative team. So what I'm finding right now is we are seeing this turning point where we're working on, I think, in production on 3 commercial projects right now where we're using AI to generate like 80% of the actual video commercial that'll be shown, you know, out to the public. That was not happening a year ago. You know, a year ago at this time, I came out with our first ever hybrid AI, you know, commercial with Under Armour, and that was like a big deal. People were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened," and I can get into later on some of the conversations that happened in the community and all of that. But anyway, I think it's very exciting. But still, I still hear from certain big brands where they're like, we are not ready to use AI as a blanket statement. We'll get into that later, but I would say that there is definitely more people, you know, and more brands comfortable using it for consumer purposes, but there's still plenty who aren't, you know.
What do you think, Jameson?
Yeah, to build on that, I think that 2025, from what I'm seeing from my perspective, will be a banner year of commercial adoption and real world impact, like Dustin's talking about here. It's you know, it's not just experimentation, it's not just building exhibits and presentations and decks, it's real product that's out there in the world. You know, we have at Athletics the good fortune of working with several Fortune 500 technology companies who are deeply investing in AI. And the thing that I've seen start to shift is this understanding of, we know that AI is the future of our company, and we expect our customer base to be adopting the solutions that we're building rapidly. We also, as an organization, need to adopt those tools. And if you look at the stats that are out there, I think Gartner said that by 2026, 80% of the enterprise will have implemented GenAI in a fundamental and meaningful way.
Yeah. Okay, what is, because I feel the same way. 25 is the year either you get on board or you will be behind if you don't put it into scale production. But I'm still kind of, what was the flip of switch? Interestingly, when I was at NRF earlier this year with retailers, they were there ready to buy. Like they were like, how do I put AI into my workflow? Where do I do it? But I'm just curious, what do you think, what flipped the switch for people, and why is now the time that they're ready to get
Well, I'll just say from a creative standpoint, because there's obviously all sorts of different ways to use AI, and from just a pure creative using it for content production, I think people have been looking at it from like the automation standpoint, which is obviously a huge opportunity, but I think for the first time, at least in the last several months, you're starting to see more narrative-driven spots created with AI, and that was, to me, a big turning point. And that's also when, you know, a lot more video generation is coming out, because before it was all montage stuff, and everybody would just be like, this is just montagey like images. This isn't a real commercial. There's no narrative here. It doesn't deliver on the craft. And to work with the type of brands and agencies that we work with, there is a certain level of narrative storytelling and fidelity, and I think AI's it's getting there. It's not 100% there yet, but like it's getting there. And to me, that was one of the turning points.
Can I ask you guys if you can maybe speak about specific projects, like if you're able to disclose a brand or some specific applications? I think it'll help everyone kind of get on board. It's like an on-ramp. And Eric, maybe we start with you here.
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
one particular project we're doing is a company called DevCo, which is a big medical incubator working in partnership with Rutgers. So it's thinking about the commercialization of medical research, what companies might start. And so what we're doing is kind of an installation that is multi-part throughout this new building. One element of this is taking in interesting research and compelling research that's being done by the tenants of the building, taking that in, processing that information, and kind of creating a generative content from that. And so what's interesting about and very awesome about Firefly is that there's attribution, so you know where things are coming from, and the content that's being generated is putting up on screen, and obviously there's a human in the loop to do curation and make sure it's beautiful, or not just letting it make up whatever it wants. But I think people can come into that space and see the building almost dreaming about the things that are happening in the building. And that can be essentially real time, nearly real time. And that was impossible to do, a year ago. And now it's very possible, and it looks cool also.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
because I think for your peers here of like how to get started, how did you convince them that
Yeah.
it was okay
Sure.
to use generative AI
Sure.
in that huge installation on a university campus?
I think part of it, you have to have a client that's willing to take the journey with you and have a visionary attitude, visionary personality. So I think that's key, because it's still, I think people are still nervous. And some of our other clients have a lot of big financial institutions, technology companies, that they do have some pretty strict restrictions on what AI they can use internally and what they can employ. So I think that's changing. But this client in particular, I think, was very open to it, and we presented this compelling vision, and they were on board. So it was a really nice nice to see them kind of holding hands with us.
Dustin, an example that you can share with us?
Yeah, we were talking yesterday, and I'm going to share the same project. I've had a chance to work on several AI projects that have made it out into the world, but there's a project that we did for Starburst that I think is a fun one, because it started with a great creative idea, as well as there was a strategic reason for using AI. It wasn't just, let's just use AI for a gimmick. And the media agency had been doing some research on Gen Z, which is the audience for Starburst, and they had found that there was ad fatigue after people had seen Starburst ads more than a few times. So they said, hey, we need a bunch of versions of these ads. So then the creative concept, which came from their agency, DDB, was it's different every time. So it's a different experience every time you're reading a Starburst. So then ultimately what we did as the creative production partner is we shot on a green screen, and we shot somebody, like 2 people eating Starburst all sorts of different ways. And then here's where AI came in. We created this AI style transfer pipeline where we actually applied a certain design style like papercraft or pixel, and we applied it to the green screen footage. And that enabled us to deliver on the creative idea of different every time. And so every time you had a Starburst, it went into one of these different worlds that we had done. And the AI was animating and applying this design style. It took about 4 hours to do per style, and it would apply it. And this would have normally taken us a lot of time for hand animation. Yep. And it enabled us to create all these versions. So we ended up creating 84 unique versions of the ad, and actually 300 versions when you include all the aspect ratios. So then it delivered on what the media team needed, and hopefully people were not having that ad fatigue anymore. So that was, and I'll just share because you had asked the question from a legal standpoint, we were using this from licensed imagery. So we were able to train on the style, like pixel, papercraft, whatever it is, create a mood board. Then the creative team and the client would approve it. Then we would go in, train on that, and apply it to using this AI style transfer pipeline.
That's a great
So that was one that we had a chance to work on.
Perfect. James?
And I think, you're touching on something fundamental or foundational to the conversation that we have to have with our clients, right? AI is not an efficiency play, it's a creative multiplier. And what you're able to achieve with using AI as a creative partner is not feasible from the perspective of time or budget. And you're also getting on the creative end of the spectrum, you're getting new ideas, you're getting a volume of new ideas that perhaps you weren't going to actually be able to get to inside the constraints of your agency. One of the things that we're experimenting with a lot right now is training Firefly custom models on client illustrations. And we're finding really, really incredible results. I think that, going back to something else you said earlier about the pathway of adoption, another thing that's happening is the quality of the tools, the quality of the output is going up that exponential knee as well. So what we would have been seeing in the spring of 24 with the tools that we're using is, not of the same level of quality of what we're seeing in the spring of 25. And so when we think about this, we go back to that idea of brands that get to work. Our premise is, you can no longer test content in silos. You have to test content in market, and you have to be able to connect the feedback loops and iterate very, very rapidly to avoid that sort of fatigue. And being able to train an AI model on hand-drawn illustrations and then be able to extend that set and connect it back to those signals is a really, really powerful way to be able to express your brand in 2025.
And something, if it's okay, I want to add on top of that is, I think because it plays into a question we were asking earlier, is how do you sell this stuff in and what have been some of the blockers? And I think when you hear illustrations, a year ago, everybody would be going, but what about the illustrator? Like, you're just training on an illustrator stuff. But the thing is we just have to take a step back and go, we've been working for years with music composers. And the way it works in advertising is you pay them to compose the music, and then you actually negotiate another fee to use it for a year or 2 years. So again, we just have to tell everybody, hey, we already have some ways that work. Just apply it to like the illustrator. And now you're up front, you pay the illustrator a fee, and now you have the rights to use it and train on it, and they're aware of it. And so that's where I think we're finally, people are starting to come around to it, but I would definitely encourage everybody who's out there, like, start to settle everybody down by reminding people that we have some tried and true practices that work, and we can apply them to the things that we're doing now.
I think you're hitting on something that's really important to lead the conversation on, which is IP protection. And you've all shared your stories of how you got to Adobe and using Firefly, maybe versus some other tools. But IP, and then what you're raising is essentially the royalty structure. Yep. And how AI applies to that. So let's tackle that, right? Because I think that is the real question in the creative community and with our clients that might say, like, how do I know that's governed? How do I know that IP is protected? And how do I pay the artist? Because I want the artist community to be vibrant. So what are your thoughts, on IP?
I completely agree. I think there are some amazing, incredibly powerful, open source models that have provenance and training data sets that are a little questionable. You're not sure where they come from,
He's being nice.
Yeah, that's being diplomatic about it. And I think that's, that's great for research and proving that you can do something. I think when you're talking about the commercialization and the actual business side of it, like, well, you can't use a lot of that stuff, and it's real touchy to even start experimenting with those tools when you're not sure about the ramifications of what might come down the line, or we might find out about something 6 months later. So I think that's a huge concern. I think a lot of our same thing was, as Jameson said, like these Fortune 500 clients, that's a big concern for them, and that's something where they won't even touch it until they're sure that they're in the clear, to even attempt to play with it.
And a lot of people also are training on owned assets for their brand. So, brands have a lot of data and they have a lot of content. Now, what a lot of legal teams are doing now, though, is now looking into it and going, well, what rights do we own for the stuff that we shot, 3 years ago? What can we do with it? Can we just edit it into a remixed commercial with AI content, or can we actually train on it? And so that's going to vary depending on what the contracts are and other things that people have. But it's going to be very interesting to see how brands move forward. And I was sharing, I think, this story with you. One of the things that we found as a little trick is prompts, are so important, and they're actually paper trails. So to prompt something and be able to show in the prompt, hey, I'm prompting something that's very general or generic. I'm not typing in Ansel Adams' photo. that's where you can, if you ever were to get in trouble, you can keep all those records. And that's what we're doing with some of our clients, where you have that to be able to show like, hey, we were taking a responsible approach. We weren't trying to rip off someone's IP.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, and I mean, for those who may or may not know, like in the Adobe tools, we have content authenticity, so everything is tagged, so you know where it was generated, where it was touched, and commercial models. To your point, it's like, you know, our legal friends want to keep a paper trail, whether it's in a movie release or in an ad commercial as well.
And that, I mean, that concept of being commercially safe can sometimes be a dry concept, but it's so critical to the conversations that we're having with our clients. It is critical to the conversations that we're having with our creatives, because we, as leaders in this business, have a responsibility to use AI responsibly. And we have to think about it across the tools, across the business models, across the contracts, in a way that helps all ships rise with the tide, as opposed to sort of push certain folks outside of the creative conversation.
Yeah.
That's the last thing that I would ever want to do with adopting these tools for client work.
I mean, back to that point, I think we were talking about, there's still a lot of education. You guys are deep in this, you know, we're all deep in the space, but there's a lot of education that needs to happen for this to be ubiquitously adopted in commercial applications. So you're kind of doing a lot of education, probably, you know, person to person out there. What is the conversation? Like, where do you take it from? Is it at the CEO level? Is it the CMO? You know, do you got to talk to the GC and the legal team? Take me through some of that sponsorship mapping and how you have those conversations. I know you said, oh, they were just like enamored with the concept, but as you think through clients, like, how are you navigating that?
I mean, I guess from maybe a little, also dry, but maybe from a VSA, MSA engagement level, you know, a lot of clients have put that language into their contracts, where they used to be cite all the open source tools that you might be using on a project. They would be reviewed by legal. You know, that's pretty normal.
Standard, yeah.
Now it's starting to be, what AI tools are you going to be using? What do you think you might anticipate? And the legal teams want to review that. They want to see that, and of course the IT security teams as well. So I think that's a very open conversation early in a project's formation.
I also think it depends on the scale. You know, if it's something where you're going to be implementing software that's going to be, you know, working company-wide, like automation of content,
Sure.
that is something that is going to require, you're going to be talking at the high-level CIO, you know, and executive level. If it's using it for a one-off campaign, then you might be talking to the head of production or the great creative director, you know, at a brand or an agency. So I think it really depends on the scale.
Size.
And I listen, for us, I've been going around and probably doing too much talking, but I look at it as like, it's open source, meaning like what we're trying to do is open source our knowledge. And if you look at any of the project pages on the tool site, you can see so much information about how we approached it. We show a lot of and that's the approach we've taken, particularly over the last year, where we're trying to share people and help also our creative community understand all of the human involvement, you know, that goes into this stuff. So that, because a lot of people, and I'll share a quick story, is like, we did a project a year ago for Under Armour, and it ignited a firestorm of conversation because we created a spot using partly AI plus mixed media. And immediately, it was one of the first big commercial projects that came out, you know, using AI, and some of the creative community was very upset. They were like, but you're just pressing a button and generating this. And that's why it unlocked our mind going, oh, people don't understand all of the work. We were like, there was a team of 21 people who worked on this thing. We did not press a button and train on other people's videos and then just output a 60-second ad. And so it took that kind of level of open sourcing and communication to get people to go, oh, you know, like, cool. Like, I'm not saying everybody wants to use AI, but it did help in getting people to, you know, come around.
Yeah.
And I mean, that concept of transparency, whether it's in contracting, whether it's in conversations with your team, whether it's with conversations with the creative community, being transparent about the way in which you're using it is so critical to the conversation right now.
This is why I love the SoDA, the whole construct, and what Tom, Beck and team are doing here, is because you guys are open sourcing the knowledge. And I think the knowledge gap is the hardest part. It's like, where do you start? How do you get started? Basically what you're breaking down is the workflow. Most creatives that want to adopt AI because they figured it out, it's going to save me hours and hours of time in post-production editing on something, and I could be doing something else instead of rekeying frame by frame. So, but I think having that conversation and putting that knowledge out into the world, which is, again, why these live series are super fun, is awesome. I'm gonna ask about use cases, and I know you specialize in very different things, but what are the use cases that are resonating? Jameson, you said it's not an efficiency play, but actually what I find resonating a lot is CMOs telling me, hey, my CFO cut my budget, or my CFO said flat budget, and I have to do more markets, more ads, more reach. So what are the use cases? Is it localization? Is it aspect, generating aspects? What's landing for you guys? Maybe we'll start at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, right? The fact is that CMOs are being tasked with record acquisition targets, but their budgets that they're working with continue to just shrink year over year. And so there is an aspect of GenAI that can be applied to help CMOs solve for those challenges. One of the things that athletics we're really excited about is we've been working for the past few years on a motion design and production platform. It's designed primarily for marketers, social media content creators, folks in corporate comms or sales that need governed, on-brand motion assets, but don't necessarily have the creative mastery of tools.
An After Effects specialist.
You would be amazed at how few those
there are very few
in,
of those.
in even the biggest organizations out there. That's all well and good, but for us, the big unlock in the past 6 months has been to be able to incorporate the Firefly Services API into our tool.
Good plug.
Hey,
love
that's
it.
what I'm here for. But it's amazing because it's a really well-built API.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
easy
Applause.
for our engineers to implement. They got it done in a day. And now we've got generate similar, we've got text to image, we've got object compositing, we've got generative fill, we have image expansion. So when we're thinking about the breadth and the depth of the assets that we have to create and all of the various aspect ratios and context which we have to create those assets for, you're combining essentially GenAI and creative automation in a way that allows people to do that much faster. And the hope is not that it's a race to the bottom.
Right.
The hope is that you're able to actually spend that time doing strategic thinking, doing creative ideation, and elevating the quality of the work.
Yeah. And when I guess going back to your question is I would say that what I have found is it's taken some early education and showing inspiration and other things to unlock people's minds to also the realities of AI, of what it is, because a lot of people have all sorts of different ideas, and for a while people literally did think you could just press a button and output something amazing. But some of the use cases that I kind of see recurring are there's the automation use cases of like product photography is a great one where I've had several clients come to us and say, hey, the way that we do tabletop shoots for our products, and then we have to go to a shoot, and then we have to we do it every single time, and then we need it for our website and social media. It's too inflexible. Like we need to move faster, and that's where AI can come in, where you can, if you use properly and you train on a brand style and for photography style, you can start prompting and generating, which is obviously a big thing that you can do with Firefly. So that's one, and then there's like the creative craft side of it, we're doing it for one-off campaigns. And I think that's where you're seeing much more hybrid, AI production, where it's like shooting live action production. But instead of shooting for several days, you're maybe shooting for one day, and then you're using AI to generate all the other footage, and then you're editing it together to create it. You can also do it like we did for the Under Armour one, where you kind of remix, taking old stock footage, but now remixing it with new AI footage and creating. But I guess the use case is, how do you create well-crafted, advertising content for Fortune 1000 brands, but use AI to do it? And it is using it partly to save some time and money, but it's also using it to also hopefully do something at a much bigger scale than you could have ever done with the kind of marketing budgets that we're all seeing right now. And then the other use case is 100% AI, and I think what you're starting to see with that kind of content is it's being used for commercials, it's being used for social media, but the bigger use case for it is the personalization and the scaling of it, so that you can start to deliver a different ad for somebody in Austin versus the ad you're gonna deliver to Los Angeles. And that's where it starts to hopefully pay off on the promise of what media and other people have said for a long time, which is the more personalized you can be, the more engagement you're gonna get from people.
Yeah.
And I feel like, going off of that, I think for us, the tool has allowed us to, we're generating content that's on these huge canvases, immersive media, these ultra high resolutions. A lot of time in the past, a lot of our effort is spent on making sure that those resolutions and aspect ratios are being met. Yeah. And the detail is there, and that we're doing the quality. That's actually, a lot of that work is sacrificing the time you would spend doing the creative concept and the actual brain power of making it good or great or excellent. And you're taking all that effort, and AI has been helping us in a huge way to make that content really super high resolution, whether it's up-resing things, generative fill, like all those tools have been kind of almost like a new kind of sparring partner for our creatives. That yes, they have each other, and then it's like, all right, well, let me just generate a few versions. Let me see what this looks like if I expand it. Let me see what this will be like. All right, let me go back into the cycle of design and stay in that cycle of design and concept longer, and make it better.
You've all actually said AI is raising the quality, but I think the myth is AI is just creating a bunch of spam creative that's not on point. And I know you said this before, it's going to separate the real creative artistry from the not great stuff. But maybe you can start, Justin, because you felt like there was a trend of like the creative is just not even hitting. Forget about AI or not.
Well, I mean, listen, obviously it's a subjective thing, but I would say a lot of people I talk to, and for me, there's not a really memorable advertising campaign that I can remember in the last few years. There was times where there were certain campaigns and everybody would go, this is it. And I feel like that's for many different reasons, but I think part of it is that we've been stuck in the mud of having to figure out, like, how do we create all these versions and social media and all this? And that's where AI, if used properly, can hopefully help us solve some of the versioning and some of the things that maybe don't require the bigger thinking, and let us hopefully spend our time on crafting these amazing ideas that we can then turn into hopefully very memorable campaigns for brands and for our consumers. So I think that's my optimistic side of saying. That's why.
What do you guys think about quality? I mean, there is out there. It's like, okay, you can tell it's not great quality.
I think it's a fair criticism. I think you think back to like the Industrial Revolution and the mass production of objects, right? Tea kettle, whatever it might be. You can produce thousands instead of tens. So you have this great ability to produce lots and lots of stuff. A lot of them not so great. But you wouldn't have like a Dieter Rams. You wouldn't have these great designers and these great, amazing form over function examples of artistry that obviously became famous and amazing, and they wouldn't have existed without the Industrial Revolution. So I mean, draw that metaphor out to the next few years of where is AI going to go, and how are we going to separate kind of the mediocre work from the really excellent, amazing work. I think both will happen.
Yeah.
Both will be there.
Well, I mean, I think blanding has been a problem, blanding as opposed to branding, since well before GenAI.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Right, so it's now, is GenAI potentially going to increase the volume of blanding? Yes, most certainly. But I'd love to just go back to a story that you told on Saturday about Norman Teague and the way that in your conversations with him, he's using AI. And the thing that stuck with me was this idea of a search engine for the imagination, right? So, and having another brush in the arsenal of brushes that he has. I think that the best creatives, the best creative agencies are going to see GenAI as just another tool in the broad set of tools that we use to do the work that we do. And anyone that is, writing a 5-word prompt and pushing a button and thinking that they're going to get great results out there in market are probably going to run into some challenges.
They're finger painting instead of
Yeah.
a beautiful oil painting.
Shameless plug for Norman Teague, who's showing at MoMA right now. So if you're in New York City or get there, he's showing until May 11th in a gorgeous exhibit that is, as you said, he used Firefly as a search engine for his imagination to reinvent kind of a catalog of work. So it's intriguing. It's pretty fun.
But something I'm going to add on to it too is a lot of it is a tool, and a lot of people do talk about it as a tool, but I do feel like this is more monumental than anything I've ever experienced in all of my years in advertising. And for example, for us, we're using it to help us, augment some of the things we're doing on just like the administrative side. We're using it for creative. We're even using it in our accounting department to help with literally now I just snap photos of my receipts and it automatically cross-references it to my expense report. So it's I don't know of anything else I've ever been a part of that can hit on the business side and the creative side of our business, and that is why it is a monumental shift in what's happening.
I agree. I mean, I think there are little technology innovations, and then every once in a decade, you get the invention of the internet, right? Yeah. I think we're on a tectonic shift. I mean, this is going to be changing how we really approach work, how we think, and all those things. So I agree with you that it's kind of a big shift.
Yeah, the thing that I say is AI isn't going anywhere, it's going everywhere, right? So don't think you're going to blink and it's gone.
Okay,
it's going
so
to be everywhere.
Following up on that, because we've had this conversation, if it's going everywhere, and there's two sides to this question, how do you manage the change, right? Because all of our work, creative work, is people.
Yep.
It's human ingenuity, it's humans at the center. There are some folks, I'm sure you should talk about, who are just not on board with this. But just talk about approaching the change element of something so big like generative AI.
I mean, I completely agree. Humans hate change. It's the fear of the unknown, and doing something new in a different way is risky. And it's inherently, even if you consciously are making that decision, I'm going to try this new tool, subconsciously you're going, oh, this is different. I don't know. I should just do it the way I want to do it, And I think that's okay. That's human nature. I think for us, it's been kind of paving the way, even internally for our own teams.
Yeah, how big is your team? Talk about
Yeah, we have, a team of 20 designers 20 people that are doing work, and some of them see AI as a fun toy to play with, and sometimes it creates helpful work, and some of us see it as a essential, like I said, like a sparring partner, with which they're kind of bouncing ideas back and forth and getting to a higher level of better idea than they would have if they just did it all by themselves.
Do you have any holdouts? People who are just not comfortable?
I think some people are set in their ways of whether it's the design process. Some people still love just getting a pencil and sketching and coming up with ideas, and they want to go through the normal process that they're used to. I think starting to show, hey, this could be more fun, more rewarding. It's not just a pain in your butt to open this new tool and try it. That's been successful. So I think that's
one funny, well, not funny, but there's a designer who is helping to redesign a brand for an agency for internal, right? So she needs to go as fast as possible. She always starts with sketch, but she feeds that sketch as a structure reference.
Yeah.
And then she told me, these are her words, she was delighted because she can't sketch that fast, right? So then she could generate 100 things off of the reference and then start picking and choosing, compositing. So it still starts with the basic skills of I'm going to sketch this on paper.
I mean, from an architectural standpoint, we'll do some blocking out of a space,
Sure.
Very low-res, primitive kind of objects in an architectural space. Take that, put it in as a structural reference, and give it some style, and you're it comes up with a whole bunch of great ideas. We're that's cool, that's cool. All right, these will be inspiration for the next round of design and iteration.
Awesome. How about you?
Well, so we have our full-time team, but we also represent film directors or video directors or live action directors, whatever you want to call them today. And there's some people who are Academy Award winning, DPs and other people who are commercial directors. So I guess my point is, yes, we have some directors who are not comfortable, using AI or thinking about using AI, or they're writers, and the very thought of AI is something for a writer that a lot of these people are, they have a horror, when they think about it. So what we've tried to do is we've had once a month inspiration series where we just try to show people real applications. So like show some of our comedy directors, look, here's some examples of how you can use AI to augment in the making of what you want to make. Or X another director, here's a cool way you can use it for visual effects, or here's a cool way you can even use it to change up different lines of dialogue. So it starts to open their mind. Now, I'll give an example. I have one director who has really not been comfortable with AI, and we're just about to kick off a project, and they kind of came around where they're like, hey, listen, I don't want to over-publicize, the project is AI, but I see how it's going to let me create all these versions of content in the background that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, and it's going to help me deliver on the comedic performance and the comedy that I want to get. So they've opened it up, and it just happened to, it all comes from real usage. I think anybody's going to come around when they actually have an opportunity to use it and it solves a problem for them, be it creative or business or whatever it might be.
Can I just follow up on one question, which is, I do talk to a lot of film directors as well. Advise me on how to help them. Only because some directors have said to me, Hannah, do you not know what we do in post? We're splicing all kinds of things manually to get a line that wasn't said.
Yep.
We're using CGI. So the people who are kind of leaned in are thinking, this is not very different than some of the manipulation we do in post. But if you could advise, how would you help educate someone on pulling it into that pipeline of workflow?
I mean, listen, my experience has always been if you show people real applications that are going to be practical to them, then that starts to unlock their mind to, cool, now I can start using it. But again, we have different people. Like you mentioned the dialogue. We had somebody come in who we were enamored by their tech, and you can literally train on a talent's face, creates a 3D mesh of that face, and then after that's done, the talent can re-record lines after you've shot, and you're in the edit, and you go, oh man, I need this line, or I need this line, or I need this. And you're able to then now perfectly lip sync it using AI and put it in. And that's, we can all start doing all sorts of versioning. So anyway, for some of our directors, when they see that, some of our directors are like, yes, now I know I can use this. And one of them, we just did an experiment with it on a car commercial. So anyway, it's just actually using it.
But back to making sure the talent signs off on
Totally.
that, is compensated in the process for that. I think that's part of the
they'll have to. The talent has to know up front. Hey, and again, you negotiate it and you say, hey, we want to do X, Y, or Z, or you're paying them a little extra to go, hey, record on your iPhone now 50 other versions of the dialogue, and they're able to do it. I mean, that's to me, that's what's exciting, and I think. Listen, some film directors may never come around, but I think the majority of them are. I mean, I was on a panel several months ago, and it was one of the people who was one of the founders at one of the bigger visual effects and CG shops, and he was talking about how in the early 90s, believe it or not, people were just starting to create graphics in movies using CG, and there were picketers outside protesting, so upset that technology was being used to do this, and it's just kind of how it is. So it's this cycle.
Yeah, I think we all know King Kong is not actually climbing up the building, right? That's CG. Yeah. Sorry, it was change, Jameson.
No, well, yeah, I mean, going back to that idea of actual usage, and we were chatting about this outside for a few minutes before this conversation, you've really just got to get the tools into people's hands. So a practical example from my studio is that as one of my business partners came up with this idea, we're hosting our first AI day for all 36 of our team members across all disciplines: strategy, design, technology, client experience, operations. Everyone is going to experiment for the entire day as it applies to their domain. And while I'm really, really excited about what's going to come out of that. The thing that I'm most excited about is it being a motion towards normalization. Let's normalize the way in which we work. Let's understand that we all work with these tools. So far we've had a kind of a FAFO, and I'll say the nice version, fool around and figure it out, attitude, because you kind of have to. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to use this tool because I think I can do something cool with it, you go, let's invest in this, let's make time for you to experiment. But those one-off, those sort of point solution moments need to be something broader that the entire team is able to participate in.
And something also to add is, I think a lot of us, we want everybody to start embracing this, but I think it's something you said earlier, we do have to understand that it is a different workflow, for people. Yeah. And I sometimes forget because I'm like, oh yeah, let's try this, try that. And we have to, even with our clients, help them understand. And there's this step of sometimes even just with creative reviews, understanding you're not gonna have the same level of creative control that you do with a post process. It's a different type of review process. So setting those expectations early and even having conversations with clients about workflow and understanding that, it's really important. And we work with a lot of ad agencies and they're all trying to figure it out. So for them, they're used to shooting a commercial and they're like, this is exactly the process of how it goes. Right. Well, now they need to understand the new process, and it's not radically different, but there is a different process. And until people try it and understand it, and then they can get their clients to understand it, that's the process that needs to happen.
Yeah. Little tastes.
Yeah.
Little bits along the way. Yeah, I think Jameson, you commented having the ability to just kind of introduce your team to different tool sets. We're also similarly, we're doing that, sensing people in a space. Of course, you can get a really huge, powerful computer 5 years ago, and you can sense someone in a space with a Kinect camera and see track their skeleton and their gestures and all that. Now you can do that on a Raspberry Pi, which is a couple watts of energy. So you're talking about major savings from energy usage and cost and compute. But it's also it's a little show them, just have one set up in the office. People walk in front of it, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's a little creepy, how can it do that? And you can explain it, it opens up the conversation and it normalizes it. And that, I think that goes across all automation, internal ops, and the creative process as well.
Well, open invitation, because I know Adobe has a partnership with SoDA. If you want to try the tool, we are absolutely encouraging you to trial the tool and play with it, because I do agree that the unknown is when you're maybe I don't like that, but until you get in and start playing and seeing what delight or disappointment you get out of it, you really don't know. So that's an open invitation that Adobe is supporting with SoDA at any time. Okay, I think maybe last question, because we're getting close. What are you excited about from it can be AI specific or just from a technology in the next couple of years? What are the things you're really excited about?
I think for me in particular, the kind of the no code or low code tools that are coming out now that are ability to have you think about these kind of infinite canvas tools that you can link up multiple different agents or multiple different kind of predefined systems, and maybe you can define them yourself and link them up to something else. I think that's becoming really interesting, especially in the world of generative content in particular. I think it's a little bit more advanced probably in the text only or code world. But in the generative content world, that becomes really interesting. And I know this project concept is going to be very exciting once it comes out.
Adobe Project Concept is an infinite canvas that lets you go on. But can you maybe define for everyone how you see agents? Just because I think that's kind of agentic is a little bit in newer in the taxonomy, and people think of it as different ways.
I mean, I think of this. There's certainly a technical definition of an agent, which is an AI tool that does a certain set of things and it's prompted. I guess the way I kind of encapsulate it is a predefined set of processes and knowledge bases that have you give it a request and it kind of generates a return and it sends it on to the next guy, right? And then you can have another agent that does something else, or it can choose which agent to then send it to. Yep. And when you can have multiple tools, and each one of those are wildly powerful unto themselves. The ability to kind of combine those and pipe those into each other, and I can do that as myself on my computer, but if I have my whole team has access to that, build and modify that network, that starts to become really interesting and the way to just generate a ton of content, both from scale standpoint, but also refining it to make it awesomely beautiful. And you can, and like I said, like the idea of like automating the conforming out into many different versions, you have a tool that knows what to do. It's like, okay, I need 10 versions of this and all these crazy aspect ratios.
Right.
Please make those. I'll check them when you're done. Let me know. You know?
Yes. I mean, because I think what we're saying is there's drudgery work.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to be filling in pixels for like a new aspect ratio. That's not really, awesome.
Yeah.
What are you excited about, Dustin?
Well, I mean, listen, I think it'd be hard not to talk about agentic AI in,
Sure.
going forward. And for us as an example, like, thinking about how do we use agents in Photoshop, to just like assign certain tasks, do it over and over again, and then to your point, like the drudgery work is kind of gone, and we're now focused on some of the bigger picture or more of the areas that need our craft. But I think from an advertising, like creative standpoint, when I'm hoping to, I'd rather not use AI just for like one-off campaigns. I'd rather almost create like a campaign platform, using AI, so that like all these different assets, including the 30-second commercial, you're able to create so many new versions, and it's almost like the style transfer thing that I talked about. That can be reused over and over again. It's a pipeline for, in that case, Starburst. And I hope that we get to a place where we start thinking about this stuff more holistically versus, let's just do this one-off campaign, do the shoot or however you make the content, and then you're done. Like, it's how do you keep applying it to allow yourself to like generate all these other types of
I feel like what you just described is like you want it productized. You're saying, I want a template, whatever the workflow is, and then put it into a product somewhere. We'll take those product requirements from you offline. Go ahead, Jameson, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I mean, +1 to agents and operators. I think that, when we think about connecting various visual models, AI models together right now, there's not a great solution for doing so. There's a bit of just drudgery in either the manual work or the API integration work.
Sure.
And then, I was looking for that sort of no-code, low-code solution. Those exist across LLMs. I think when it comes to GenAI, I think agents or operators are actually going to be the solution, because there needs to be some embedded logic in the way in which they navigate. But the thing that I'm most excited about is this idea of the democratization of creativity. Because what I believe is that we're going to be able to invite people, and I'm talking about in the world of professional design, we're going to be able to invite people inside organizations into the creative process that traditionally have only been requesters. And we're going to be able to unlock their lived experience, their perspective, their domain knowledge, and tie that to creative outputs in a way that helps move organizations forward. And I can see from the perspective of a career creative that being perhaps threatening. But I believe there's also a place for those career creatives to continue to shepherd forward the quality, the level of engagement, to be able to help these people up-level and upskill and join into that creative process.
Yeah, a side benefit of bringing non-creative, maybe I'm the non-creative, into the process is we talked about how you actually get more alignment earlier because they can visualize it, they're in the process because they have access to tools that let them be creative, and it actually helps you in the review cycles later.
Yeah, and you were talking about process, right? And like we've been sort of stuck in what I call the black box design process for a very long time, where you make a request, I do something, I put it in the box, you take it out, you put it in, it keeps going back and forth, and then maybe we get to something good. Whereas perhaps we could get aligned very, very early in the process and get to something great with the new workflows and tools that we have at our disposal.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I really want to thank our wonderful panelists for outsourcing and sharing their open sourcing their knowledge for everyone else. And thanks again to the SoDA team for hosting this live series. Thanks for joining us from South by Southwest.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.